guys, it's Trish here at Anchorhead Farms. It's such a beautiful day. I'd love to invite you over so that we could tour the garden and talk a little bit about companion planting today. Now, there are some people that say that companion planting doesn't really work, but I've really noticed a big difference not only in the way my produce looks, but also the yields of my harvest. So I truly believe in it and I incorporate it whenever I can. So come on, let's take a look around. As we walk around the garden, I'm going to show you what I've been growing, and then point out the companion plants that I've paired them with, and why. Companion planting is a time-tested gardening method that enriches and protects vulnerable crops. How time-tested? Well, Native Americans were using this technique before European settlers even arrived in the New World. Basically, this is a strategy of planting crops near each other, because companion plants can do a lot for your crops, like help control pests, stimulate growth, improve flavor and even the taste of your veggies, attract pollinators and other beneficial insects, maximize space, protect plants from things like too much sun, and even increase the health of your soil. Now let's look at this bed on the left. And this is where I have all my specialty greens and things that I grow that I can't find at the grocery store. Like my watermelon radishes. I love these things. When you cut them open, they're just so beautiful. Look at this really thick stalk. Unlike regular radishes, the red ones that you find at the grocery store, these things take about 60 days to harvest. So they're a little bit longer than the red radishes, but they are so worth it. Now the radishes need a little bit of shade because it's already starting to get warm, so I grow them right next to my purple kale. That also gives them a little bit of shade so they can stay longer and finish up growing. As you can tell, look at this. It's just gorgeous. These deep purple leaves, different shades of purple, and look at that stalk. You can tell I've already been harvesting these for soup. The leaves themselves are really gorgeous, and they're a little bit stronger in taste than normal kale, but not like the one at the grocery store at all. Our spinach is packed in pretty densely, and that's for a reason. I harvest these leaves really young, so they don't really grow to maturity, so I can get a whole lot of yield out of this small area. Now this next crop is something that I really enjoy eating, but I have a hard time finding it at the grocery store. It's either really small or the leaves don't look that great. So I decided to try to grow it on my own, and I'm really glad that I did. Look at the deep green on these leaves. They're just really gorgeous. And look at the stalks. They're firm and crisp, and if you lightly steam them, they really retain that crunch. So I pack quite a bit in this area, and we use a lot. Now we get to one of our first companion plants. See those little marigolds? They're tucked into my kale, and they really help out a lot. Unlike the purple kale, this curly kale is a lot milder in taste, and we use this mainly raw in smoothies, but you can also let it grow to full length and then use it in soups. But I also use it in salads, and it gives Caesar salad a really good flavor. With this plant, the more you harvest, the more it grows, and this ended up being one of my favorite vegetables in the garden. Now you'll notice again, this is packed in pretty densely, and that's for a reason. But there's still little spaces in here, and that's where I tuck in my marigolds. They really keep the aphids away from my kale, and add a little bit of color to this big bed of green. Now for the bed on the right. As you can see, we really like our salads. And we have a lot of flowers tucked in all around the garden, and that attracts a lot of beneficial insects, like this ladybug. She's hanging out, do her own thing. I really love seeing them all over the garden. So once again, you'll see this is pretty densely packed in here, and it's because we want to fill in as many as we can, and it keeps the ground nice and cool, which is exactly what lettuces love. So we grow varieties of onions in this lettuce bed, and as you can see, we've been harvesting the ends pretty frequently for chives. Pests don't like the smell of onions, garlic, anything like that in the onion family at all, so this really keeps the pests away from my leaves, and it gives me some heads of lettuce that don't have a whole lot of holes in them, I mean, they look pretty perfect. There are a few varieties in here. Buttercrunch lettuce is something that we like to use for a lot of our wraps, but also for some variety in our salads. But for the most part, you're going to see a lot of romaine in here, and that's because that's what we use the most. Unless we're harvesting it for our neighbors, what we usually do is cut it off at the stalk and then put the ends back into the soil, and it really helps boost the nitrogen. Now this is where I noticed the most drastic change in my produce, because almost none of the leaves have any holes in them at all. So those onions have really paid off. Now that's it for the larger beds. Let's go back to one of the smaller beds that's tucked away in the back. Now back here we have a crop that I think is mandated by Texas law. I don't know. But anyway, I think everybody in Texas should have these because they're just so useful. These are our jalapeno plants. And as you can see, there are lots of little blooms on here, just waiting for those peppers to come out. And tucked in the middle, you'll notice all these little pink flowers. They're not necessarily companion plant, but they do add a lot of color to this bed, and they do attract pollinators to this area. Plus, in a sea of green, which we have all over the garden, it's nice to have a little pop of color here and there. I do like my things to look pretty. I do have two different varieties of jalapeno peppers back here. One of them is hotter, and then one of them is bigger. So I use the smaller one for things like pico de gallo and salsas, and then I use the bigger ones for things like stuffing for jalapeno poppers and appetizers like that. And the stakes are for a little bit of support. Now back here is our sunniest bed. And this is where our bell peppers and cucumbers really love to grow. But we also want to keep them safe from predators. The nasturtiums will attract the pollinators that eat the pests that love these plants. But they'll also provide shade for the marigolds that are tucked away in here too. Marigolds are known to stimulate growth of vegetables growing nearby, but they also control pests too. And they help keep the red bell peppers nice and healthy. And even though it's early in the season, you can see there's quite a bit of blooms on this plant already. And tucked under these leaves, you can see we have quite a few bell peppers just waiting to come out. To make harvesting a little bit easier on myself, I also built this bed a little bit lower because I'm kind of Oompa Loompa size, and so it helps me to be able to reach everything quite easily. Now here's the trellis in the back, and that'll help to keep everything growing vertically. Now I lost my cucumber plants in the freeze, so I had to buy these, but they're tucked away in there too. And to protect the cucumbers, we have dill planted right in front of them. The pests that like to munch on cucumbers don't like to munch on dill. They really, really hate that smell. And then over here at the end of the bed, we have another red bell pepper plant. Look at all those blossoms. And look at that little cutie. So we have a stake here for some support, but then it's also got the trellis, just in case it needs more. And we have more nasturtiums and more marigolds tucked in this side too. Now these plants are more prone to pests than the others, so we really have this bed packed to the gills with companion plants. Marigolds and nasturtiums are pretty popular companion plants, but herbs are really effective too. Now here we are on our last raised bed, and this is separated for a reason. Mint is really invasive, and although it's got a great smell, it really takes over a bed. So to keep my other crops safe, I give mint a home of its own. Now it can spread out as much as it wants. There's spearmint and peppermint tucked in here. And just like with the curly kale, the more you harvest it, the faster it grows. Now planted here in the middle is my gardenia. And although she barely survived the freeze, she's really holding in there. Now, I was really worried about her, but she's been growing some new leaves, so I think she's going to make it. When she's in full bloom, she'll also provide some shade for the mint, which makes them really happy. Now that's it for the raised beds, but that's not it for the plants. These last two groupings are paired right outside my back door, mainly for convenience, but also for a few other reasons. This citronella really helps keep the mosquitoes from the back porch. Now this agave doesn't produce fruit or flowers, but I just love her so much, so she gets a home here in this bed. Now my sage, thyme, and basil didn't survive the freeze, so I've had to start some of those over again in this bed, but they're coming along nicely. Now that liriape back there on the right, it got a lot of winter damage, so I cut off the leaves and used them for something else. I'll show you later. So here's the new sage plant, and then here's the rosemary that survived the freeze. I trimmed down the dead parts, and it's coming back really nicely. Now don't tell the other plants, but she's really my favorite. Now on the left side of the porch, we have our berry patch, and we've put this strategically over here because the birds love to come and check it out. This is something new that we're trying this year, and I've really loved having these berries right outside the back door. We can harvest about a handful almost every other day, just enough to top our oatmeal with. I'm really excited to see how this thing is going to grow. And over here, this is where we have our big berry producer, our strawberries. I've removed the side of this cage so you could take a good look inside. It's a pretty big area in here. These berries like to spread out, and they also like to send out runners, so they need a lot of space. Now the crowns like lots of air, so there's 2 layers of mulch in there. And to keep the birds away, we created this cage. This protective cage is made out of reclaimed pine and window screen material. We made it long enough to protect all the strawberry plants, but then also tall enough so that the birds can't pick through. And we even gave it a friend, some thyme. For every plant, there's at least one herb that'll help keep the pests away. And with strawberries, that's thyme and also chives. Now I put the berries right outside of the back patio door so that I can keep a close eye on those runners that like to develop. Snipping the runners will help your plants produce more berries instead of just a bunch of leaves. So I'll let the runner produce roots and then move it to a container to start a brand new strawberry plant. And then here, at the end of our bed, is another blueberry plant. Now unlike strawberry plants, blueberry plants can get much bigger. This one's young, but as it grows, it'll get taller and wider. So I put the blueberry plants on the end to give it plenty of space. So the birds like to show up early in the morning. So I'll keep this cage on until about noon. And then I'll remove it so all the pollinators can come in and do their thing. We harvest and freeze quite a bit of berries every summer, so I'm really excited about these blueberries. So let's take a closer look at the mulch around these berries. There's 2 layers. There's the wood chips, and then there's the straw. The wood chips keep the crowns dry, and the straw gives the berries a bed to sleep in. And the thyme ensures that nothing eats them before we do. I'm really glad you guys had a chance to stop by and tour the garden with me today. I'm excited to hear what you're growing, so leave me a comment below. Tell me all about it. I love you guys. Can't wait to see you again here at Anchorhead Farms.